Will, I know you said we had, oh, here's Ian. And I'm assuming Linda's coming as well.
Could be, yes. And excuse me, Joe's going to be a few minutes late.
Okay. Well, since it's 5, I'll start reading the remote script because it's a little lengthy and hopefully everybody will sign on. Okay, so we are using Zoom for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. The chair can request that members of the public provide their names for the purposes of keeping accurate minutes of the meeting. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can then click the raise their hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on each of those who have raised their hands in the order they were raised, and all questions should be directed through the chair. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal.
Yes, present.
Seth Engelborg.
Here.
Erisman here. Ian Golding.
Here.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Here.
And I think we'll be getting hopefully Linda and Joe a little bit later. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Will Delerba.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. We have Karen Beatty.
Here.
Jess Cohen.
Here.
Susan McCarthy.
Here.
Michelle Hunton.
Here.
Michael Soares.
Here.
Lee Weischer.
Here, sorry,
That's okay.
had to unmute.
Cole Bateman.
Here.
Art Gasparo.
Here.
Julianne Busa.
Here.
RJ Turcott.
Here.
And Jennifer Carberg.
Here.
Right. Thank you, everybody. So good afternoon. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. And for any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And it looks like Joe has joined us. Joe, can you hear us okay? Can you unmute and just respond so we can hear you?
I'm here.
All right, thank you. Will, I see your hand up.
Hey, Ashley, I just texted you as well, but I completely glazed over the fact that Linda will not be here tonight. She did let me know in advance too.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like everybody's here who plans on attending.
Yes.
That's great. So we will open tonight's meeting with public comment on items not being heard on the agenda this evening. So are there any public comments? I do not see anyone with public comment, so I will run through tonight's continuances. There are quite a few. Under notices of intent, we have Local Bowie Properties LLC at 15 Loretta Lane, continuing until July 6th. We have the Trustees of Reservations, Cascada Cotu Wildlife Refuge, continued until July 6th. We have the Linda Loring Nature Foundation Incorporated at 90 Eel Point Road, continued until August 3rd. We have the Nantucket Conservation Foundation at West Hummock Pond, continued until September 28th. And then we have Nantucket Islands Land Bank at 65 and 67 Easton Street, continued until July 6th. Under amended orders of conditions, we have Dotry Ack LLC at 2 Mariner Way, continued until July 6th. And that is it for our continuances. So we will begin tonight under notices of intent with Nantucket Boathouse LLC at 2 and 6 Easton Street. And I believe this is represented by Cole Bateman and Michelle Hunton.
Yes, good evening. Michelle Hunton on behalf of the Nantucket Boathouse. As you recall, we were here a month ago for this project, which involves the normal maintenance and repair of a bulkhead and existing pier that have existed since the 1950s in this area on this property. And we had requested a waiver from the local regulations because it's our position that the project fits within the definition of grandfathering pre-existing use under the local regs, because it's the normal maintenance of structure that has existed prior to the bylaw being enacted here, as well as the Wetlands Protection Act.
Michelle, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think Will, if possible, would prefer if you or Cole shared your plans just to make sure whatever screen you guys prefer is up tonight. So I want to make sure, and it looks like Cole's on that. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
No worries. And as we presented last time, we don't see the project as an extension or modification, as it's just the repair of what's existing. However, even if the commission had determined that the project was a modification, it's still our position that because there's no adverse effect on the resource areas, the project still fits within the definition of grandfathering under the local regs, and the local performance standards are waived. At the last hearing, it seemed like the commission had sort of focused its concerns on a couple of issues. The two really narrow issues were the material that was being used to maintain the bulkhead, the FRP, as well as some concerns of potential impacts to the town's shellfish facility on the eastern area of the property. And as the commission probably has seen, Cole submitted a letter related to the FRP issue, and Lee Weischer submitted a letter to address the concerns regarding the shellfish facility. So I'll let them explain to the commission their responses to that, and hopefully it addresses the commission's concerns.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, and thank you everybody for joining tonight. As Michelle said, we have come back with a response regarding the questions from our last hearing. One of them, which I'll talk about, is the material which we're proposing, which is a fiber reinforced polymer sheet pile that would be installed directly in front of the existing bulkhead. It essentially clad it. Fiber reinforced polymer is a composite product And in the additional materials we submitted was a breakdown of what that includes. And answer the two questions that the commission had was whether or not there is PFAS present in that product and whether or not the product sheds microplastics. And the answer to both of those is in the negative. The material used to put together this product is not a PFAS containing material. It's an epoxy. It's a polyester epoxy, and in this fiberglass for the fibers. And then the second question regarding the shedding of microplastics is that this product is a very robust material. The epoxy used for it is durable, and it's microplastics tend to come from plastic that should not be in the environment to begin with, sort of like a plastic water bottle or fishing line, which can break down. Additionally, this product would be facaded with the timber bulkhead to prevent any impact or potential flaking of the product due to debris impact. So we believe that we've sufficiently covered all the material hazards that could possibly be there by not having PFAS, and then also by having a protected FRP sheet that would not yield microplastics to begin with. And then with that, please, Lee, if you could please talk to your part, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. For the record, Madam Chair and members of the commission, my name is Lee Wisher. I'm with the Woods Hole Group. I submitted a detailed letter outlining why, in my opinion, that there is no impact. The chair, just to refresh your memory, the chair had asked a question at the end of our last hearing, wondering whether or not the bulkhead would have an adverse impact on the Nantucket shellfish facilities located to the east of the project. And the short answer is that, in my opinion, it will not have an impact. The two possible impacts, let me back up, I guess, in view of moving this along, I'm just going to give a several sentence summary of my letter so that I don't belabor the point, and presumably if there's questions, I'd be happy to answer them at the end. So the first effect is reflected waves. Waves inside the harbor are generally generated by winds blowing over the open water, called fetch. The effective fetch length at this property is approximately a half mile out of the east. And the angle of incident wave approach is almost 180 degrees across the property. And therefore, the reflected waves will not adversely affect the shellfish facility because of the fact that there is no opportunity for them to reflect towards the shellfish facilities. The second effect is end effect erosion. Now, this occurs when sediment is transported away or down drift from the structure. And as I pointed out before, the waves that, even though they're small, they're generated are essentially going from east to the west. So from Brant Point across the property into the harbor itself. And so the sediment is not transported away from our property. And so the bulkhead does not interfere with the sediment transport going towards the shellfish facility or Brant Point. And so as a result, any sediment transport is actually coming from Brant Point across our property from the east to the west. And the last point I would like to bring up is that if you've been to the property and you look at the east side of the property, it is the beach is the highest there. The existing bulkhead has been there for a great number of years, and there has been no adverse effect from the existing bulkhead to the shellfish facility. That's, if anybody has questions or the members of the commission have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
If I could please add one more thing to the end of my, thanks, Lee. If I could please add one more thing, a reference project that also includes FRP would be the Easy Street Park wall. We briefly mentioned this in our last presentation, and here's an aerial view of where FRT is present in Nantucket Harbor. It's a small portion of the the bulkhead at Easy Street Park. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. If you're done with your presentation, you can stop the screen share and I can get to questions. Awesome, thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for this updated information. I think there's just two quick things I have in my mind. So first, I think that this definitely meets the definition for modification. I think given all the information, there is not a adverse impact, but we need to make sure that in the findings, we do call this as a modification so that we're making sure the process moving forward continues to work as described in the regulations. And then the second thing is the current timber bulkhead. Do any of the project representatives know what material that timber is? Like, is it a creosote pile or what? I'm just asking because it'll be important for the orders of condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Cole, would you like to respond?
Sure, thank you. And I don't believe I stated my name for the record before. My name is Cole Bateman. I'm a project manager with Coastal Engineering Company. Thanks for the question, Seth. I believe it is. It's an existing timber bulkhead with creosote piles and probably creosote lagging as well. I know that the piles are definitely creosote though. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I just may respond, the reason I asked is because we dealt with one of these a few years back now that was also creosote, and we added some conditions about doing a survey of any potential toxic material that would be coming out of that creosote prior to construction. I think we should add that in this project as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Mike, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Michelle, Cole, and Lee. My question is regarding the height of the wall. I believe we touched on this in the last meeting, but is the height being addressed as a little higher with coastal resiliency in mind? Where are we with the height of the wall? I just don't recall.
Who would like to take that question?
I'll start off by saying, and this is Cole from Coastal Engineering. I'll start off by saying, yes, the wall is being raised 1 foot. And then Lee, if you'd like to add any additional comment to why it's being raised, just to refresh the commission's memory. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. We chose 1 foot because of the fact it falls within the town's coastal resiliency plan for this particular location. And I think it's 0.8 feet or 0.9 feet actually, as opposed to 1 foot. So we rounded it off to be 1 foot. And so that's why we chose that particular elevation.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a big project and a lot of trouble to go to. So just I think the height increase is a good thing.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. So we'll open up Nantucket Boathouse LLC at 2 and 6 Easton Street for public comment. I am not seeing any public comment. So if commissioners aren't looking for more information, do we have everything we would need to close?
Yes, we do.
Representatives, would you like to close?
Yes, we would.
Okay. Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Joe, seconded by Mike. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Mizzarelli,
Aye.
Flandowski.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
And that moves us on to Breglio at 52 West Myacomet Road, represented by Arcasparo. Oh, Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm recused from this one.
Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with the continuation of the notice of intent that we presented at your last meeting for a set of beach access stairs. And we had continued for response from Mass Natural Heritage, which we have received. It's a conditional letter of no take. We are amenable, or of course, agree to those conditions. And the other question from Commissioner was related to at such time if the property was to be transferred, would the owners be willing to give up the timber stairs for seasonal aluminum? And yes, they're amenable to a condition such as that. Again, the timber stairs are really necessary or currently needed for the mobility issues related to the current owner, which they would greatly appreciate if the commission would not require them to do the aluminum stairs. And with that, I'd be happy to, don't believe there'd be an adverse impact or effect on the interest protected by the commission. And we'd be happy to address questions or concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like not at this point. So we'll open it up for public comment. Breglio at 52 West Myacomet Road. All right, I'm also not seeing any public comment. So with Heritage, I think I know the answer to this question, but Will, do we have everything we need to close?
Affirmative.
Art, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
All right, do we have a motion to close? Motion made by Mark, seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
So that carries with Commissioner Mazzarelli recused.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that moves us on to Nantucket Conservation Foundation at 303 Pulpus Road. I know we have Karen Beatty on for this, as well as a variety of other representatives. I just want to remind other representatives, please state your name and your affiliation when you speak. And I believe this is also a project that it might be good if one of the representatives shares the screen, just so we make sure we're on the plans that you're actually referencing. And with that, Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, Ashley. I am Karen Beatty, with the Vice President of Science and Stewardship with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. Our submission is for a watershed level wetland restoration project on NCF-owned property at Windswept Bog, which is located off of Pulpus Road near the Wawinit intersection. This is a project that NCF has been working on since 2019 with our partners, the Mass Division of Ecological Restoration's Cranberry Bog Program, and Fuss and O'Neill Environmental Engineers, and their representatives from both here this evening. I'd like to give a brief intro and broad brush overview, and then turn it over to Michael Soares and Julie Busa from Fuss and O'Neill to explain the details of the project. Windswept Bog was developed as a 40-acre cranberry bog in the early 1900s. The foundation purchased the property in 1980. It was first leased to a commercial cranberry grower, and then cultivation was taken over by NCF in the early 2000s. The bog was certified as organic in 2004. NCF's Board of Trustees voted to retire cranberry cultivation at Windswept in 2018. And there were many reasons for this, including industry-wide economic and climate change difficulties. But however, the main driver for us was water quality concerns. As a conservation organization, we felt that it was very important to not contribute any inputs, even if they were organic, to the harbor. So our board voted to abandon cranberry growing at this site, and we have not done any cultivation here since 2017. Since then, we've been working with Mass DER's Cranberry Bog program to plan this project. They have extensive experience developing similar projects elsewhere in Massachusetts, because similarly, cranberry growing is being abandoned in many other places. And they've been really fantastic partners, providing technical assistance and funding and expertise. This project aims to restore naturally functioning wetlands to the former cranberry bogs that will provide beneficial ecosystem services and provide water quality, improve water quality that comes in from the surrounding watershed and filters through the property. We did ground penetrating radar surveys to confirm the presence of extensive beds of peat under the site, which indicates that historically, before cranberry growing, it was a wetland. The Foundation Science and Stewardship Department has done extensive research and surveys on rare and unique plants and animals on the property, and the results of those have been incorporated into the design to avoid or minimize impacts. We have an approved habitat management plan with Natural Heritage, and Fuss and O'Neill, who are here this evening, have been really invaluable wetland scientists and engineering partners since the beginning of the project planning stage. And so I would like to turn it over to Michael and Julie from Fuss and O'Neill to go a little bit, go into the details of the project.
Thank you very much, Karen. My name is Michael Soers. I'm a wetland scientist with Fuss and O'Neill out of our Springfield office at 1550 Main Street in Springfield. I'll be doing the lion's share of the presentation, but I'll also be turning it over to my colleague, Julie Busa, who is a professional wetland scientist and senior ecologist out of our Springfield office. And for a few slides, I'll be turning it over to one of the Cranberry programs, program specialists, Jess Cohn. So they will introduce themselves in their own time. Let me share my screen, and I would like to go through a brief presentation to kind of summarize the project and the existing condition and proposed restoration that we have here in the NOI. After that, if there's interest in going into the plans themselves and working through that, happy to do that to answer questions and clarify anything that we present here. So yeah, as I said, this has been called the Windswept Bog Wetland Restoration. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied. This has been very much a collaborative effort between Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Department of Ecological Restoration, the Cranberry Bog Program, and ourselves here at Fuss and O'Neill, going back to about 2018. So this presentation will cover these topics, really just very briefly go over the location, the goals of the project that's being proposed, a bit about the Cranberry Bog Program, which has provided a lot of good science-based evidence that these types of bog restorations have been very successful in southeastern Massachusetts. Then going over the site itself, its existing conditions, some of the key elements of the design that we're proposing, and also how that implementation will be going about, as well as the sequence, and then some renderings, as you saw on that first page, to just kind of show, you know, kind of give you a sense of where the project, where the site will be when the project has been restored. So very quickly, we are over in the eastern part of the island, just off of Pulpus Road. Windswept Bog in total is just over 230 acres as a property, as a site that NCF manages, Nantucket Conservation Foundation. But our project area is really about 86.5 acres within that northern portion of the property. And we'll just quickly go over the goals and then we can get to the site. So the goals for the project and the goals for most bog restoration projects are to address the legacy impacts of the farming infrastructure that limit natural recovery of a wetland system. So for those of you that aren't familiar, cranberry bogs are historically built on existing wetlands. So existing wetland soils, because cranberries prefer very moist, well-draining soils. And so the agricultural infrastructure of ditches, culverts, berms, et cetera, creates a landscape that manages water in a way that is not conducive to sustaining a wetland system. So we want to address those impacts and help it recover to its historic system. So that's the second point, sort of, is to initiate the rejuvenation of that self-sustaining system. And that's really trying to reintroduce the natural hydrologic regime that was once there before there was agriculture. Because this is a full ecological restoration project that complies with the improvement of habitat for rare species, We have many opportunities across the site to expand and enhance habitats that are not only important to rare species, but also unique to Nantucket. And NCF has done an incredible amount of work understanding the site, documenting the site through its extensive work over the past 4 or 5 years to prepare for this restoration project. So it's been a very iterative process of using that information to refine the design to make it as successful and as beneficial as possible. A fourth benefit is climate resilience. I'll get into that a little bit on the next slide. And I just wanted to touch on the interests of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act that the project supports. And so we've got a lot of crossing interdependent benefits that the project will help achieve once it's implemented. For climate resilience, we just want to mention, being a coastal community and seeing that coastal impacts are increasing and will continue to increase. Early in this project, we did an analysis of where mean sea level will be in the year 2100. This is not our analysis, but we brought it into Windswept. This is from NOAA, and this is their intermediate high scenario for sea level rise by 2100. And so you can see from the legend at the bottom left that over time, the northwest part of the site can have some tidal influence and sea level rise impacts coming up Millbrook Creek. There are some constrictions that prevent that today, but forward thinking, if those constrictions were opened up and Millbrook Creek was allowed to be as sort of unconstricted as possible, by the year 2100, there would very likely be some sort of either freshwater or even brackish tidal influence in the northwest part of Windswept. So that does inform some of our design decisions in these bogs 2 and 3 that we refer to as trying to open them up and provide more storage in this part of the site. I'm now going to turn it over to Jess Cohn from the Cranberry Bog program.
Thank
Jess,
you, Michael.
Just let me know on the slides.
I will. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Cohn. I'm an ecological restoration specialist in the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, or Mass DER. In DER, I work in the Cranberry Bog Restoration Program, and my background and training is in wetland ecology, and I'm a professional wetland scientist. Windswept Bogs Restoration Projects is one of the projects I manage within DER, and in partnership with NCF and Fuss and O'Neill. As Karen said, DER has been providing ongoing technical and funding support to the Windswept Bog Wetland Restoration Project since 2019, and the project is identified as a DER priority project for restoration. Actually, and then briefly, you can see our mission here to restore and protect rivers, wetlands, watersheds in Massachusetts for the benefit of people and the environment. Next slide, please. Excellent. So DER has a cranberry bog restoration program dedicated to providing assistance to landowners and farmers interested in restoring healthy wetlands on retired cranberry bogs. DER has worked on approximately 20 cranberry bog restoration projects in Massachusetts, both past and projects that are currently being planned, including the largest freshwater wetland restoration project in Massachusetts, which was Tidmarsh Farms. Our first and oldest cranberry bog restoration project was completed in 2010 and is now 13 years post-restoration. Next slide, please. And our program has learned a lot over the past 10 years about the restoration of wetlands on former cranberry bog farmland. A lot of these findings culminated into a report published in 2020 that captured our insights on various restoration techniques and approaches. This report is authored by a group of scientists partnering with an NGO called Living Observatory, which is a learning community centered on the wetland restoration of cranberry farmland. If anyone is interested, you can go to livingobservatory.org to download that report. But on the right side here, you can see some of the main overarching findings and positive impacts that we've seen across some of our sites. Next slide, please. And finally, here's my contact information. In addition to 2 photos showing a cranberry bog wetland restoration project site On the left, the site is just after construction and grading had finished in the winter. And then on the right is just 8 months later in the summer. So you can see sort of the native seed bank, the plants rebounded very quickly. And we have several photos like this of other sites across Massachusetts. And I'd be happy to provide more information if interested. So thank you. I'll pass it over back to Fuss and O'Neill.
Thank you, Jess. So just go quickly into the site itself. I think Karen covered some of this about the background of the farm, or the property rather, being farmed until 2018, being part of open space that they manage and maintain in perpetuity as conservation land. And I just want to reiterate that if you can see in the map shown here, our project area is the yellow dotted line, which is just a subset of the overall area of windswept bog, which is about 230 acres. And so our focus is the cranberry bog, the former cranberry bog operating area. You can see here there are 14 bogs that equal 40.6 acres. There's a lot of alterations to the landscape, as I'm sure you can imagine, in order to be able to grow and harvest cranberries here. One of the biggest factors is the added sand to each of the bogs over time. So the bogs were originally built in wetlands, but to keep it the type of media that's best for growing cranberries, often yearly or on some sort of regular schedule, sand is added to the bog surfaces for growing media. And what that starts to do is sort of eventually collect and push down the native wetland soils. And so you've got an added sanded surface that is a major alteration to the landscape. And the other one, which I already alluded to, is just the extensive system of infrastructure to direct water, concentrate water, hold water, drain water. We've got earthen berms, culverts, weirs, constructor reservoirs, scrub wetlands that are utilized as reservoirs, ditches within the bogs themselves, and even ditches between bogs through some upland areas that convey water, just for them to effectively manage the water when they were growing cranberries. So none of this sort of speaks to the wetland systems that are on Nantucket. And so our approach is to try to dismantle that. To do that, it's very much a data-driven restoration design that we have worked with NCF and DER on. There are surface and groundwater monitoring wells that have been on site to understand the hydrology and flow gradient and depth of groundwater, both seasonal high and seasonal low, that has informed the restoration design. Karen said we have done 2 phases of ground penetrating radar. The image you see here is showing that we have native peat deposits, so wetland peat. Imagine muck if it was completely dried out. That's essentially peat. And most of the bogs have at least 5 feet of peat. Some have an excess of 14 feet of peat, 14 feet thick. And that's pretty much across the site, except for a few bogs in the Northeast. So it helps us understand the likelihood of success of wetland restoration when the bog surfaces are restored, that we have not only wetland soils that will provide appropriate groundwater hydrology in those areas. There's also, it's been demonstrated at the other restoration sites that there are a seed bank, a pretty viable seed bank within those wetland soils, that within the first season of restoration, the first growing season, that the dormant seed bank will germinate and help stabilize the site immediately. It's really fascinating to see just pictures 3, 4, 6 months later and how quickly things come back. We've done a number of topographic surveys as well as boundary survey. We have visited, DER and NCF worked on identifying reference wetlands on the island. That's the photo on the bottom. And what we're trying to do is emulate that photograph that you see there, which is very characteristic of the unique wetland systems on Nantucket, which are these sort of broad, shallow, wet systems that don't have a stream flowing through them or a creek or anything like that. It's really this diffuse flow path that holds water, but also flows through these emergent wetlands that you can see in the image. And then you can see on the edges how as the elevation rises a little bit, we get into these transition zones of shrub swamp and wetlands, and then even higher up into the forested uplands on the far left and the far right. And so that's just, you keep that in mind as we move forward. NCF has done extensive biological surveys of the site. As I said, it's really helped inform where to work and how we can provide the most benefit to those species. And yeah, so I thought I had one more, but I already said the wetlands. But just a few existing condition photos. There are 2 large ponds on the property. We call the ones to the far east, Eastern Reservoir, and the large pond that you can bike or hike around is Stump Pond. These aquatic habitats will be remaining. So I just want to emphasize that. That's been important to the project from the beginning, is that these large water bodies will not be, these are not naturally occurring water bodies. These were created as reservoirs for the cranberry system. But given the limited number of water bodies like this on Nantucket, it was decided that these are important, valuable habitats. They're important to the public who visit the site, and so these will be remaining. And we're going to work with these systems and incorporate them into the restoration project. And the other pictures here are just sort of typical conditions of the site, showing cranberry bogs, the berms that separate wetlands from the bogs, and the culvert/weir structures that are in place between berms from bog to bog or from bog to wetland, that were used to very actively either close off or drain or otherwise regulate surface water at the site. And so I just want to touch on the key elements of the restoration design. As I've said, the main element is to remove the agricultural infrastructure. That means removing about 2,500 feet of these earthen berms, 29 culverts and weirs, most of which are in the berm. So we're going to be taking out a section of berm and taking that culvert with it. We're going to be removing the irrigation lines that are currently in the bogs, in that surface that's going to be restored. And there's 2 connections to existing ponds, to Eastern Reservoir and Stump Pond. And those are areas where we can, again, remove infrastructure to not have a maintenance concern, a maintenance need, or a concern about infrastructure failing over time. The idea is to return this site to a self-sustaining wetland system. And so 2 of the culverts that come out of the ponds are going to be replaced with a daylighted system where the water will kind of sort of flow over a cobbly, diffuse system back down into the bogs, as opposed to going through a concentrated culvert structure now. Number 2 is roughening and excavation of the bog surfaces and the ditches as well. So roughening is a common term in cranberry bog restoration, and it basically means just mixing up the surface. So breaking up the cranberry mat that currently is on top and all that vegetation, getting through that sand, which is about 16 or so, maybe 18 inches in some bogs at windswept, and mixing it with that underlying native wetland soil, the peat, so that we can get it exposed to sunlight, better exposed to the air, and allow those seeds to germinate. And decompacting it will also allow groundwater to come up through the bog. And so we'll have surface water supporting the wetlands, as well as the existing groundwater system supporting the wetland development. And those activities also create microtopography. If you're not familiar with that term, it's basically just creating a lot of physical diversity, vertical diversity in the wetlands. So rather than coming in with equipment and creating a flat surface, we want to do the opposite. And if you look into the shrub swamps at windswept or other places, and you really look down onto where it's wet, you can see that there's a lot of hummocks, a lot of very little wet pools, and then a high spot and a low spot. And so we want to add as much diversity within the bogs as possible. And so that's another outcome of the roughening and excavation. Number 3 is what do we do with that material that we're moving around? Some of it will just be mixed in place. Some of it will be repurposed on site to fill the existing ditches at the perimeters of the bogs. Currently, those ditches offer a great, easy place for water to just go and sort of bypass the whole bog. And so we want to basically create a single kind of platter or shallow bowl shape to each bog and have the water go across that whole system rather than bypassing it with the existing ditches that are there now. We'll also use that material to, again, create that diversity. And some of the berm material, if it's not going to be repurposed in the bogs for those grades, we're going to be bringing it into the uplands to create some depositional areas to add that physical diversity back to the uplands. If you've ever been to windswept, it is a very flat site, and wetlands are often flat, but the uplands there are also very flat. And that's because, you know, for the convenience of accessing the system, they not only do a lot of work in the bogs to grow the cranberries, they're also working in the uplands to create very flat uplands. So we'll be using that material in the uplands to add some of that diversity back to the system. And then a secondary, well, not secondary, but another element of this project is to just make sure that the site access is maintained for NCF's access to continue to manage the site and maintain it and steward it. But also for the public. It's a very popular site with an excellent trail network that can take you in a lot of directions. And the trail system will change a little bit, but we are proposing boardwalks and some other amenities to improve the system and keep all the access and connections to trails off-site as well. So just really quick, this is a simplified version of existing conditions. This is the 14 bogs. The red is the trail system, and the green are the existing bordering vegetated wetlands that are mapped by DEP around the site. So you can see we have a lot of opportunities to make connections to existing resource areas, and we'll see that in this next slide. And so here you can see now the bogs are no longer disconnected, but are all very connected and also connected to adjacent wetlands. The color scheme, if you can see in the legend, is just trying to help understand the habitat, the wetland habitat zones that we're going to create with different elevations. The darker green will be a little bit wetter, a little more regularly flooded. And then the lighter greens will be drier areas. And you can see some little yellow spots here and there. That's where we can take the berm material and create islands. When we were thinking about where to put all the material that will come out of the berms, we had this idea of creating these islands. And in talking with wildlife biologists as well as natural heritage, we've got a lot of good feedback that this sort of island creation of not real islands, but an upland island within the wetland is an excellent way to improve habitat diversity and create sort of upland refuges throughout the wetland system. And I believe the next one, you can see that the next one sort of combines what the proposed trail system will look like and the wetland system. So how we'll still have a lot of accessibility to the site. Large trail network still has access from Pulpus Road and Almanac Pond Road, but just slightly modified. So this is in the NOI application, but just want to touch on the proposed impacts. But if you can see from the far right column here, we also like to summarize the net change since we're converting a lot of resources into new resources. And so the big one really, as you can see, is the top row is that the cranberry bogs, which are the second row, are being converted into natural BVW, not the sort of subset of cranberry bog BVW that DEP currently categorizes it as. We also have some impacts to land underwater and bank. Some of that is temporary. There's a small chance that if we are doing the daylighting work associated with the ponds, that a contractor might prefer to temporarily draw down a pond as opposed to using a cofferdam to build those daylighting structures. And so we have a high estimate on our temporary impact to land underwater and bank, just to kind of cover that possibility. We do think cofferdams are going to work, but we just wanted to include that as an option as well. There's also some temporary or some permanent impacts related to land underwater and bank related to ditches in the cranberry bogs. And I'm just going to turn it over to Julie Busa with Fuss and O'Neill to kind of talk about our thinking on that and the status of those resource areas.
Thanks, Michael. My name is Julie Busa. I'm a professional wetland scientist and senior resilience scientist with Fuss and O'Neill. So for those commissioners who were at the site visit on Tuesday, we pointed out a number of these locations. During the MIPA process, we received feedback from DEP that they wanted to classify the main ditch that was passing through each of the bogs, creating the main flow path through the property as streams, which would have associated bank and land underwater and riverfront. I think it's the Nantucket regs specifically say that you don't have riverfront area on the island. And I think we sort of pointed out on Tuesday at the site visit that these areas that are being called streams to be conservative in line with what DEP requested. This is Michael's pointing out with the cursor, one of those ditches, and you can clearly see that it's barely distinguishable, really only by topography from the surrounding bog surface because it's fully vegetated. There's no flow in these areas. And so we wanted to point that out. It may be a topic that we want to discuss further, but that's why you're seeing a portion of the bank impacts and the land underwater. And similarly, to be conservative, consistent with DEP's request, we included the riverfront area associated with those areas as well. But that isn't fully consistent with the way that Nantucket has traditionally treated these areas. And as Michael was saying earlier, not consistent with what we see in the Nantucket landscape. You really don't have streams like this. Streams are very rare on Nantucket. So that's just some clarification on the impact table.
Thank you, Julie. So I'd like to just show a representative example of the proposed plans here, and then we can dive into them a little more fully to discuss certain elements. But just wanted to touch on, there's a lot of colors going on, so just wanted to touch on what they all mean so people can kind of orient themselves easily. The first thing to deal with here, which is challenging, is that our north is on the left. So even though we've been looking at it with north up, right now everything is rotated left. So north is up here at this end. So a couple of things quickly just to point out here. The pink polygons that you see are where berms are going to be removed. That is where berm removal is taking place. You can sometimes see a blue dot. That is where a culvert that connects the bogs is going to be removed. Sometimes those dots are gray, meaning that that location is going to be plugged and filled, such as this structure here will be removed, but then it'll just be filled with material and returned into part of the main vehicle access path that NCF will have to get out to the Stump Pond Dam. The green dotted line are the trail system. Sometimes that green line turns into a brown line. That's where we have boardwalks crossing just through what's going to be wetland, what is a berm now, but we're going to keep that path, but just create a boardwalk there. The green to the edges are the BVW, the wetlands that we mentioned before. The orange areas, you can see 4 or 5 of them here. These are the depositional areas which we're proposing, where the berm material will be brought out into an adjacent upland, and these depositional areas will be built using that, and then planted with a seed mix that NCF and their botanists and their research staff are going to work with the network, the Sandplain, correct me, Karen, if I get this wrong, the Sandplain Grassland Network. Is that correct? Okay, thanks. So they were a founding member of this group, and the idea is to make sure they get not just if you buy generic seed for restoration commercially, you can get mixes that don't quite match up with the genetic makeup of what's on Nantucket. So we're very lucky to have so much research experience on a lot of different capacities. So when there's some upland restoration that's conducted, NCF's going to make sure that what is seeded will be as appropriate as you can get for Nantucket. You can see some flow arrows here indicating the direction of flow. that we're proposing through the site. And it's basically one giant system that will flow northwestward, eventually into Pulpus Harbor. Just very quick, we have our construction sequence also in the plans. I now rotated this one back to be north on top. So I like seeing it north. I apologize if that's confusing. The polygons here of different colors are our construction sequence. And I just have 2 red arrows out on sequence 1 and sequence 2, because our overall objective is to do sequence 1 and sequence 2 in the first year and see how the restoration behaves and through that full growing season, and then use year 2 and possibly year 3 to implement the rest of the sequences 3 through 6. So just to give you a sense of that. The different shading in the bogs is related to roughening or excavation. This pattern here is roughening, which is really just mixing the surface and the sand and the peat and breaking up the cranberry mat and filling the ditches. Where we're hoping to go a little deeper and create small pockets that are a little more permanently flooded for habitat diversity. You have this different line type. Oh, I'm sorry. You have this different line type in some of the bogs showing where we will be trying to go down a little bit deeper to create the grade for continuous flow out of the site and also to create that diversity of different wetland habitats. Just a couple of slides to go here showing proposed conditions. This is looking across the large bog, bog 6, kind of at the center of the site, looking eastward. And so you can kind of see the before and after, which is a pretty, there are some wetland plants in the system, but if we left it and didn't do anything over time, the system will trend towards upland species. There's a lot of documentation of abandoned cranberry bog systems that basically just go to pine and other upland species. And so we're going to bring it back to where it was. And then just one more to show you the combination of public access, habitat restoration, wetland restoration. This is the bog just next to the parking lot near Pulpus Road. So that completes the presentation. I would be happy to go into any of the slides or the plan set itself, and we can answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, everybody. I think I can go to questions with the screen share up just in case people have something they want to reference back. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Joe.
Yes, I have a couple of comments. The NOI was very well written, in my opinion, particularly after having a visit of the property. It really all made sense. It all got put together. I think had I not had that visit of the property, the NOI might have been a little more difficult to understand, but combining both of them was a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to all the project representatives for their application. So I'd first like to start by saying I'm very excited to see this project, and I really appreciate the ability to have ecological restoration of this former bog on island. The only comment I have is really sort of separate from the restoration itself, but it relates to the proposed trail and boardwalk layout. And so I completely understand the desire to keep suitable access given NCF's mission. But if you look at where the current trails are now and essentially the proposed future trails closely mimic them, they were sort of created haphazardly based on where the existing berm roads were. And I would just implore NCF to consider redoing the trail so it is more of like a standard loop or figure eight or some type of other, little bit easier for first of all, for the public to navigate, and second of all, have a little bit less impact. Could probably have less boardwalks by doing that. And I think that there's a way that NCF could, revise the trail and still have the same experience, the same views of the site and the same opportunity for the public to see this restored wetland with just a little bit of a cleaner trail layout. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to NCF and the Fuss and O'Neill team. I found the walkthrough to be very helpful, and to me, this is like one of the more exciting projects that I've seen come through in my first year on the commission. It's to go back to the early 1900s to restore the land is, I think, great, and I'm very much looking forward to continued development of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I know I'm also very excited for this project. I'm really a creature of habit, so part of me is sad to see what I'm used to, knowing it's not going to be there, but realizing that there's this like amazing wetland restoration that's going to take place is pretty great. I'm maybe a little bit the opposite of you, Seth, with the trails. I understand the impacts of trails, but I do see, a reduction in what they currently have. I think given that there are already trails in a lot of these locations, it's actually maybe good for the public to have more access and actually see what these wetlands can function like. And I also like the ability to see people on one trail and I can go the other way and have my own unique way around. But again, there are slight difference, but I'm very excited for the project. If there are no other comments, Ian?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you thought it would take Millbrook Creek up to, did I misunderstand you, 2100 fully recover? Did I understand that or misunderstand that?
That was referring to projected. I might have worked through that too quickly. I apologize. That number 2100 is by 2100 we might have some sea level rise influence in that part of windswept bog. But the restoration itself, it recovers quite quickly. It can recover within that first growing season. The dormant seed bank will germinate and stabilize. That's been what we've seen at other bog systems.
So I was wondering what sort of pesticide and fertilizer residue there would be in the silt while you were talking about that, because excuse me, when I was a teenager here in the early 1960s, and Mark might be able to back me up on this, what we called Holly Farm Pond, which is just slightly to the east of the creek, was teeming with blue crab. I mean, you could just walk in and catch them. And by the late 70s, early 80s, it was getting sort of silty and fewer blue crabs. And by the early 90s, it was completely sterile. And we sort of always assumed anecdotally that it was, the runoff from the bogs. And so when you mentioned Millbrook Creek, it piqued my interest. And so I wondered whether anybody's done anything on that. And I would like to add, I'm really excited about this. So I think it's a great project and also very well presented. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think we have a couple people that can speak to that question, Ian. So I'll take my own, I'll say something about it. And then I think, Jess or Karen or Julie can also add to my comments. One thing I'll say is that the farm has not used pesticide, or the property has not received pesticides since I guess whenever it went organic. And even before that, I believe the farm was inactive for several years. So there's at least a decade, I would say, of nothing being added to the site. But as Karen said in the beginning, water quality concerns were part of the main decision on doing this project. I do know, and I think maybe we can hear a little more detail, but other cranberry bog projects that have been restored across Massachusetts have also thought about this. And the idea is basically to, as we're doing, keep all the sediment on site so nothing is being removed from site. And the other thing that I didn't mention in the sequence or anything like that is, we're fortunate that we can use this water control system during the construction project, during the restoration, so that if we're working in a bog, we can really very carefully control sedimentation and water using the existing berms and weirs and make sure that sedimentation is controlled to the greatest extent possible. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? I mean, other representatives for the project, Julie or Jess or Karen? I could go on and on.
I can jump in as well. In terms of water quality, our largest concerns and what Karen was referencing would be nutrient pollution. And so wetlands have the capacity to filter nitrogen and phosphorus, which are the main impairments that we're seeing out in the harbor. And so that's what the wetland restoration will really help to address. The pesticides that were historically used in the bogs are generally, or not generally, but chemically, they tend to be very immobile. And so they stay in those soils. So the fact that we're not moving the soil around out of the site really takes away most of those concerns and is considered the best management practice for dealing with this sort of abandoned agricultural land. And we did do some preliminary investigations to just confirm that there's nothing of concern in the bogs, and that testing played out the way that we hoped it would, where there's really nothing of concern for human health or anything that we need to address differently than those best management practices.
Thank you. And it looks like Jess Cohn has her hand up.
Thanks. I figured Jess Cohn from Massachusetts DER. I just comment on previous projects. And so in previous projects that have already been restored with this same approach, we haven't seen any change in risk and exposure scenarios related to, or at least been informed of any negative impacts related to legacy pesticide residues. Our program has been working in cranberry bog restoration since 2010. And so we have had conversations with Mass DEP on this topic and others. And given the approach and the fact that we also won't be taking any sediment off site, that and the approaches that we use, it has not created any concerns to date in terms of risk and exposure to legacy pesticides.
Well, I hope I live long enough to start harvesting blue crabs again at the end of the harbor. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Mark?
Thank you, Ashley. Just a question for someone there in the presentation group. What's going to happen to the level of water on Stump Pond is one question I have. Is that going to be up, down, or remain the same? And the other question is, how about what will the volume of water that'll be going under the Pulpus Road, will that change? It's pretty vigorous right now at times, and be curious to know if that volume of water that's coming out of the bog will change. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Michael Soares again with Fuss and O'Neill. Good question about the pond. The water level of Stump Pond will not change. Again, the goal is to maintain that aquatic system, and so when we add the daylighting or when we restore the connections from the ponds into the bog system, There will be this cobble riffle feature that will be constructed, but there will be a not be reinforced with stone, but there will be it'll keep the elevation of Stump Pond in perpetuity. So there's no plan to ever change the elevation of Stump Pond, and that was a priority from the beginning for Nantucket Conservation Foundation. And that's a great question about the volume of water. The drainage area of the site or the whole watershed is not changing. And so, my experience is that when vegetation is added in this way and all the bypass flow is eliminated, that in a storm event, we're going to have a lot more diffusion of flow, dispersion of flow, and attenuation of flow velocity going through Windswept Bog to that one 3-foot culvert under Pulpus Road. So, I expect that there'll be the same volume of water, but if you can imagine sort of the peak of a graph showing how much water is coming through, that the peak of that graph is going to be lower and sort of broaden. So the water will all get through there, but it should not all arrive at that culvert at the same time. And Karen, you wanted to say something?
Yes, through Ashley, if that's okay. I agree with everything you said, Michael, but one thing I did want to clarify in terms of Stump Pond is that the elevation that we want to maintain it at, it will go lower because sometimes that pond dries out, as I'm sure everyone here who's ever gone there has seen over time. When we're in a drought, the pond elevation will go lower. What we want to do is maintain it at a high level, and then anything beyond that, it will overflow into the bogs. So I wanted to clarify that. And then in terms of what's going out of the site under Pulpus Road, when we were growing cranberries there, it was very, very seasonal because we flooded the bogs as part of the cultivation process. And then and during the winter when we were trying to protect the buds from frost, and then they would pull the boards out of the weirs, and then all the water would flow out at once in the late winter, early spring. What's going to happen now is that it's going to be more consistent over a 12-month period. So I think much less risk of flooding, if you would agree with me, Michael, on that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Well,
Ian, go ahead.
just a historical note. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but didn't we used to universally call it Stumpy Pond? When did it become Stump Pond? It's like the Northern Harrier. We all called it Marsh Hawks, and so plus ça change, etc. Anyway, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ian. Mark, do you have an idea or a response?
Well, as some of you may know, I grew up in the area as a summer kid, and I'm sorry, Ian, but I never heard of Stumpy Pond. It must be your misspent childhood, but it was Stump Pond to me.
Foreign influence, no doubt, Mark.
Exactly.
All right, so it doesn't look like we have any more commissioners' comments or questions. If you could please stop the screen share, I just want to make sure I can see any public comment that might come up. So at this point, we'll open up the Nantucket Conservation Foundation at 303 Pulpus Road for public comment. Does not appear that we have any public comment. Everyone just must be so excited about it. So I know during our site visits, you guys alluded to having kind of all your other permits in place. I remember you saying heritage. Will, do we have everything we would need to close tonight?
Can't unmute. Yes, we do.
Okay. Representatives, would you like to close?
Yes, we would.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Joe, seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
And
you
good
very
luck.
much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Great, so that moves us on. Our amended order continued. We don't have any RDAs, no minor mods. So this will bring us to certificates of compliance. We have Lenhart at 25 Dukes Road. And hopefully everybody has seen the letter that has come through. And I'm wondering if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns. Right, looks like no. So Will, do we have any ongoing conditions with this one?
No, there should not be. The one condition that was an ongoing condition is what resulted in this now.
So in that case, is there a motion to issue the cert? Motion made by Mike. Is there a second? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. That moves us on to HA Acquisition LLC at 64 Hulbert Ave. Not sure if Jeff Blackwell's on to represent this, or Will, if you're going to take it.
Totally fine with me. So this one was for a COC. There were a few parts of the project that were never undertaken, and that was the addition on the southeast corner, a deck and roof construction, and work on the secondary dwelling. The rest of the work was completed, and everything is as it appears on the plan. I was out at the site this week, and there are actually no ongoing conditions for this one either. And I'm recommending we issue.
Thank you, Will. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this is an older order, but they had the foresight at the time to have that condition number 18, no application of fertilizers is permitted, and I think we should retain that forward. Thank you.
Thank you for picking up on that, Seth. So condition 18 going. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing not, would somebody like to make a motion to issue the cert with ongoing condition 18? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Mike. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us to Lovelace at 21 Berkeley Avenue. And I'm not sure if we have Representative Ritter on, or if Will, you're taking this one.
I think I will take it. That's fine also. This was an order for a emergency replacement, it seems like, of a septic tank. It was a failed septic tank. Excuse me, guys. There will be no ongoing conditions for this one. No sneaky fertilizer conditions. Sorry, I missed that. But this was just the 18 and 19, like I said, septic tank. And everything is all good. Recommending we issue the cert.
Thank you, Will. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing not, would somebody like to make a motion to issue the cert? Motion made by Mark. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
Great, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to orders of conditions. We have Nantucket Boathouse LLC at 2 and 6 Easton Street to start. And Will emailed these out earlier, but are you gonna screen share these, Will? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to let everybody know, I think I forgot to send out the 46 West Maya Comet one, but I'll bring that up when we get to it. Just because it wasn't a new one, so I missed it on my list. All right. So this is for 2 and 6 Easton Street. We had an additional finding that the commission finds this project to meet the definition of a modification to the
Will,
existing
sorry to
structure.
interrupt. Are you gonna screen share for us?
I thought I was. That's why I laughed. I know it's early, but I'm tired anyway. All right. So this one, I added an additional finding that the commission finds this project to meet the definition of a modification to the existing structure. We can make that more specific if we want to. And then 18, general condition, then 19, all fueling shall take place greater than 50 feet from the resource area. 20, sedimentation shall be minimized with best measures in place to contain any sediment. 21, should any of the wooden bulkhead materials be removed or exposed and in need of removal, they shall be tested for PCBs and heavy metals, including methyl mercury, to determine the treatment material in the lumber. In addition, the soil in this area shall also be tested for these same constituents. These test results will be provided to the commission to determine if further action is required.
Thank you, Will. Are there any questions, comments, amendments from commissioners? Mark?
I guess I was assuming the bulkhead would stay in place and they'll put the new sheathing in front of it. Isn't that correct?
That is, through you, Ashley, that is their plan, I believe, but I think putting one of these testing conditions we've used just since they're creosote, if they do have to, if anything is damaged or what have you in the process of sliding that FRP in front.
I get it. I like it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we need to call out under the additional finding that it meets the definition of a modification and does not have an adverse impact. If we feel like we need to call that out specifically as part of kind of our conversation.
They made a big deal about that. So yeah.
And any other commissioners' comments, questions, or amendments?
It's good to say it.
Yeah. Try and be as clear as possible. So if there are no other questions, comments, or amendments, would somebody like to make a motion to issue the order as amended? Motion made by Mike. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And I think then that moves us on to the 46 West Maya Comet Road, which is 46 West Maya Comet LLC.
All right. So if you guys will remember from the last meeting, Will's brain was not computing things quickly enough and we held this over so I could edit. So we added the additional finding. This was for the relocation of a footpath, installation of seasonal beach stairs, and then after the fact approval of the snow fencing, which is what we're kind of conditioning more specifically on this one. This order, so I put an additional finding. This order does not permit additional snow fencing or maintenance of the existing snow fencing. The snow fencing is to be removed as it is exposed. Disturbed areas resulting from removal of fencing shall be replenished with sand and revegetated with American beach grass. And then we had our 1819 and 20 was the before a certificate of compliance is issued for this site, the snow fencing must be removed in its entirety. A certificate of compliance will not be issued if the snow fencing is still present upon final inspection. And then I pulled the storm metric that I found off some other permits with the storm metric going on. So photographs showing the condition and depth of the existing snow fencing shall be submitted to staff for review after significant storm events. Significant storm events being defined as a period of sustained winds in excess of 40 miles per hour for 6 or more hours. And that is that.
Thank you, Will. Are there any questions, comments, or amendments? Mark, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Ashley. No, I think we put the applicant in a difficult position by saying that the snow fencing is to be removed as it is exposed, and you're assuming it'll be exposed, and you can't get a certificate until it's removed. It may be buried, and we're making an assumption that it will be exposed. And I know the location is gonna take a pounding at some point, but I think you're putting him in an almost impossible situation in case it's not exposed.
Thank you, Mark. We had, some extensive kind of discussion around this topic. And I know my worry was if we leave it buried and they get the certificate of compliance and then a storm comes a year later and that thing gets wiped away, it's beach debris. And because it went in without the benefit of a permit, I feel like we're being very kind to let it stay.
I heard it. I played the discussion. I heard it, Ashley, and I think the problem is that everyone was reluctant to have him remove it now because it's there's a foot showing here and 3 foot showing there and no foot showing somewhere else, and I don't know what to do. I mean, it's a difficult decision to make when you ask him not to remove it, but we'll remove it if it does get exposed.
Thank you, Mark. Seth, I saw your hand up, and then Mike, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So nothing in this order would prevent the permit holder from just removing it today if they don't want to deal with that. We're just not compelling them to remove it today. They could read this and say, it's going to be way too much effort for its worth to remove it as it goes and then eventually remove the whole thing in 3 years. Let's just remove it now. Or they could say, we'll deal with it and we'll remove it in 3 years. So we're giving them actually flexibility with the indication that at some point it needs to be removed.
If I may, Ashley.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
I mean, I disagree, Seth. I mean, we're saying the snow fencing is to be removed as it's exposed. That doesn't mean you can go in there today and start digging. It's got to be exposed to start do a little digging.
So,
Well,
Mark, I think
but it is exposed.
Yeah,
It's currently exposed.
Yeah, again, I would have had it removed today because it was there without the benefit of a permit and it's problematic, but the representative, found that problematic for the applicant. So again, we're kind of giving them a little flexibility and grace to do this at their own pace, saying, you've got 3 years and then this unpermitted structure needs to go. So again, I think it provides flexibility. But if you think it should be worded slightly differently to avoid confusion.
Nope. If you all think it can be removed at his pleasure, I'm happy. So let it stand.
Mike, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Ashley. I tend to agree with Mark. As you know, I was one of the people who was concerned with pulling out what was not exposed. I'm fine with it either way. But I'm just wondering if there's a way in the wording, if at the end of 3 years in the permit, to say it builds tremendously there and there's no snow fence exposed, is there a way to have them be able to close the permit. Just throwing that out there, I guess maybe is a question for Will or other commissioners.
They can always get a partial certificate. They can also apply to amend their order, you know, if they so choose. But Seth, I see your hand up.
No, you covered it. There's always a way. Anyone can file an amendment to any order or any new notice of intent to do anything they want, and it will come back to the commission for review.
Great. I'm good with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, amendments? All right, seeing not, I don't think we did any amendments on this one, but it's been quite a week for me. So does anybody want to make a motion to issue the order as drafted? Motion made by Ian. Is there a second? Seconded by Mike. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Ingeborg,
Aye.
Garrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Zarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that, I believe, brings us to Breglio at 52 West Maya Comet.
I'm out on this one. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder.
All right. So 52 West Maya Comet. This was for the wooden beach stairs. We have 18 and 19, and then 20. This one's actually irrelevant. I don't know how that got on there because they're not removable stairs yet. They're wooden stairs. So 20 is going away because this is the beach stairs shall be stored outside of resource areas in their respective buffer zones when not in use. But that's not real. But we did have the 20, the wooden beach stairs shall be replaced with seasonal aluminum beach stairs in order to issue a certificate of compliance for this permit. I wasn't sure if that's how we want to word this or not, that condition. So if anybody has any opinions on that, welcome.
In order, I think they'll get their certificate within 3 years or potentially earlier. And I think that they wanted this for the
Like
people
life
that
rights.
live there. Yeah. So I should probably say when the property transfers. Seth, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I would say how it's written now is definitely a way to get it done because they can't transfer a property without a certificate of compliance. That being said, it's sort of like heavy-handed way of doing it. So the only issue,
I'll be honest, I was just weird about writing like life rights in here or whatever. So
no, that relates back to my my point here though. So the only issue is that if we write it in a different way, like if we write it prior to any transfer of the property, then we need to carry that condition forward in perpetuity when this order of conditions comes for certificate of compliance. So make a note somewhere that we need to do that now, because if we don't do that, then we will effectively lose the ability to have that change to a aluminum beach stair happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I guess it'll have to be mental notes and we'll hope that we remember because we can't bind a future commission to ongoing conditions, even though we would like to.
Well, then in that case, I mean, I think how it was originally written is the only foolproof way to do it. It's a little heavy-handed, as I said, but it will ensure that the job gets done.
Ian, I think you're muted, but go ahead.
Thank you, Ashley. So I was wondering whether we could add to make it less heavy-handed, add taking into account the wishes of the current property owners. You know, because they're the ones who have asked us not to have seasonal stairs and then have it drafted as it was drafted. And that the certificate of compliance wouldn't be issued until they were removed.
Okay, so you'd prefer,
No,
Okay.
I don't mind because I didn't think it was that heavy-handed, but you know, I mean, Seth is probably. I tuned into the nuances of in a way that perhaps I'm not. So.
Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair, the reason I say heavy-handed is because it effectively prevents the permit holder from closing out this permit until the time should they wish to transfer the property. And that is going to extend the timeline much past when certificates of compliance are usually asked for, 3 to 6 years. And I don't know what the owner's plans are or how long they'll live or any of these things, but we are potentially talking like extending this permit out for decades because they are compelled to keep the permit open and not get a certificate of compliance unless they remove the wooden stairs that they are asking for. That's why it's heavy-handed, but I'm fine with it. It gets it done. It's just it's a unique way of getting it done. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one because the more I think it over, I don't know that this is something we've maybe done in the past to kind of draft an order this way. I see it both ways, but I don't know that the heavy-handed way is appropriate, I guess, in working with an applicant and property owner to like be successful through our process. Not that it doesn't allow them to be successful, but it requires them to kind of carry this open permit. Seth?
So I guess I should say one more thing. So if we do go down this route, we do need to tie the condition to a performance standard and an associated resource area, or else we're going to get called out for creating arbitrary conditions. So I'm a little worried about this one.
Yeah.
That's all I'll have to say.
I think I'd rather go the lighter way and hope that we can draft the condition in such a way that it's clear that it should move forward.
I'm raising my hand, but I don't know if my.
I can see your fingers moving now. Yes, go ahead, Will.
I just tried to redraft this a little bit. I don't know if this works or not, but I have seen other conditions from way in the past that had a note saying that this condition will be an ongoing condition or whatever, but I don't know if this will work. But I was wondering if we could word it like the wooden beach stairs are being permitted due to mobility limitations of the current owner. The wooden beach stairs shall be replaced with seasonal aluminum beach stairs before any transfer of property takes place, and this condition shall remain as an ongoing condition in perpetuity.
Well, I like it, but yes. Speaking personally, but legally, you know, it's we've sort of put ourselves into a bind in some ways by approving it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to, like, because orders of conditions run for 3 years. Again, I think this binds a future commission, and as far as I'm aware, that's not something we're really able to do. But I like the way
they have to come in to renew the order of conditions.
Like get an extension. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
But that could only last for 3 more years or 6 years. So I feel like it's almost placing undue burden in some ways. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the only opportunity conservation commissions have to decide whether conditions will extend past the order of conditions, whether that be a temporary extension or a permanent extension, is through the certificate of compliance. So even if we put this in here right now saying it should remain as ongoing condition in perpetuity, it's irrelevant. It won't mean anything. So I would ask that we just take that out. I would ask that the staff just make a note that when this comes in, the recommendation is to have it be an ongoing condition in perpetuity. Again, as Ashley said, we can't compel future commissions to accept that application, but I think if I had to guess, the commission would most likely accept that condition based on the history on the site. So we can't predict the future, but I think it's fine.
Thank you, Seth. So Will, I think we can just end it after seasonal aluminum beach chairs before any transfer of property takes place. And I think that's where we would end it. And again, hope that we have Will still in the office, first of all, whenever this is going through, and conscientious commissioners that are, looking at this stuff in detail.
I think a
One more
period
question.
that takes place makes a lot of sense, Ashley.
Yes, Will?
Does anybody have an issue with me essentially putting that staff note and calling it out as a staff note on this permit? Because even though I plan on still being here in 3 years, this is what will remind me.
I don't think we can include stuff like that on the official permit. But again, we're going to send all our
All right.
positive
Well, this is fine.
universe. Yeah. It'll get caught.
Put it in your Facebook calendar, Will.
I don't do that sort of thing.
All right. So if there aren't any other questions, comments, or amendments, would somebody like to make a motion to issue as amended?
Sure.
Right, motion made by Ian. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
Right, so that carries with Commissioner Mazzarelli recused. And this brings us on to Nantucket Conservation Foundation at 303 Pulpus Road. And I think we should discuss this one, but I kind of texted Will after the presentation. I think we're going to need a separate state and local order given the streams and kind of river issue that the DEP wants specifically called out, and the fact that we don't have that in our wetlands regs. I don't know. Like I've sat on orders before where we have one from local and one from state, but I don't know how other commissioners feel about that. And kind of want your thoughts as well as any other, questions, comments, amendments.
I've certainly never thought of those ditches as being streams, I have to say. So I was a bit surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, me either. But given that DEP asked them to call it out, it just
Right.
puts us in a funny spot. So I don't know where to go there. Mike?
Thank you. Actually, my comment is more on the findings, but Will, you had on a previous number 19 about fueling 50 feet away from the resource area. I don't know, does that 19 cover that? All materials, tools for construction to be stored outside of the buffer zone. I thought it was
we
good
could add fueling specifically
there
too.
because there's going to be heavy machinery down there.
That's a great idea, Mike. Thank you. And then Seth, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So DEP delegated authority to local conservation commissions to determine resource areas into here permits. And, I think that it's not in our interests I hear what you're saying about like the separate permits, but it's not in our interests to say something is a stream or a riverfront area just because DEP wants it to be. That causes regulatory issues with other sites. And it's also historically different than what we've done with similar properties. There was recently about a year ago, there was recently a Board of Conditions that was issued for a property that had a abandoned cranberry bog on it and had some remnant ditches, and nothing was called out about them. And the only reason I know this is because it's for an organization that I work for. Nothing was called out about the ditches being stream or riverfront area or anything like that in that application. I think that it would be bad precedent to say, okay, in our regulations, we have no riverfront and we have no stream. I would think it would be bad precedent to say we have these streams now just because DEP says we need these streams. I think what we should do is we should delegate the resource areas on site on the basis of what our regulations say. And then if DEP disagrees, then they'll issue a superseding order of conditions. But I don't think we need to like issue separate permits just because DEP wants us to. That's not really in our interest here.
Okay. Thank you, Seth. I appreciate that opinion. I just kind of thought about it during their presentation as it might be sticky for us, but I totally hear what you're saying. So we can, just do one. I just wanted to make sure I at least said something.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, if I may, I'm willing to if we want to continue this hearing and have, input from Jeff or town council or anyone else, I'm willing to do that. But we need to base our decisions based on what our regulations say.
Great. Will?
I think I agree with Seth. But I want to say to, just to his last comment, I would like to confirm that we're not putting ourselves in a bad spot by not doing that or something like that. I don't know why we would be, because I also do not feel that those are streams. But I just want to make sure that we're not checking a box or something like that that's going to immediately cause a problem.
Thank you, Will. And, I totally agree. Those to me are not streams at all, but just because kind of our overseeing authority had them called out in the project as that. Let's see if there's any other, amendments to this order and get it as tight as possible. And I don't know how people feel about maybe holding this over just to make sure that we are doing everything appropriately. Mark?
I would think if it's just left unsaid, we're not too exposed to anything that the state can do except order a superseding order.
All right, thank you, Mark. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we're done on that, in relation to additional condition number 22, I'm just hoping we could be a little bit more specific about what type of monitoring we're asking for. I don't know if that's photos or, what data we're asking for in there. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Yeah, I think we probably want photo monitoring as well as species composition, just because there is, it seems like historically with projects like this, they get a native seed bank kind of right away. But if they weren't kind of seeing that, it's important that we document species composition. I'm not sure what else anybody would add.
I'm just taking notes, by the way. This isn't how I'm going to word it, but I know we're going to hold this over most likely. So
Any other amendments or potential amendments? All right, and I must say the fact that we're holding this over 2 weeks, if I don't get reappointed, I'm gonna be really sad to not have my signature on this one because it's such an exciting project. But it will be what it will be. So if there's no other amendments, kind of questions or comments, we'll hold this one over for 2 weeks just to double check that we don't need 2 separate orders.
You and me both, Ashley.
Yeah. I like those fun kind of faux findings at the moment, Will.
oh, I was going to leave those in.
All right, guys. So Nantucket Conservation Foundation will continue 2 weeks just to confirm that the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And I believe that brings us to the end of our orders. So perfect, Will. So that brings us to extension of orders. We have Pennant Realty LLC at 4 and 5 Cascada Course Way. And I'm not sure, it says we have Hoser on to represent this, but Art, I saw your camera go on. Are you the representative?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're requesting a 1-year extension to this project in order to continue to fill in some of the plantings. It's a coastal stabilization project that's been installed, but there's some places where the density of the plants may not be to the point that it would be acceptable, I think, for a certificate of compliance. So the goal is to give us another year to continue. We've been doing the sand nourishment. They've been, I think, doing everything that we're supposed to on the project. We haven't had any failures. It's just a little more time, really, for Wilkinson would like for increasing the density of the plants.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Like no. So would somebody like to make a motion to issue the 1-year extension? Mark, you making that motion? Is there a second? Seconded by Mike. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Mizzarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. And that brings us to other business. We have monitoring reports. And I think we're just going to keep this one on there and to see kind of what comes through. And whenever we do have these reports, remember, questions can also go directly to staff.
So I was just going to say we did get one monitoring report for the surface water at 19 Wawanet Road, the land bank small farming operation. I won't go through everything right now, but if anybody wants to just call me, email me, call me if you read through it and have any questions or concerns, and we can address them specifically. But that's the one today.
Thank you, Will. So that moves us to the Two Gully Road press release discussion. So I know Will sent out the original release a while ago, and I think the commissioners were responding to him, and there might be kind of enough changes that we felt necessary for a proper discussion. Will, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I will say the number one thing that I saw differing opinions on was the inclusion of all of the names in the press release. So whether we want to name names across the board, if we want to leave the contractor's name out of it, et cetera. So really, I just need to hammer down the details of which names are going in this thing, and if anybody has any other requested changes. And if we do, we can just talk about them now and get this thing ironed out.
Thank you, Will. Ian, and then Joe, I'll go to you.
So I don't have a copy of the draft in front of me, but I feel strongly that the contractor's name should be included. And I also feel that, you know, in terms of updating our regulations, we should hold contractors responsible. So I think that would make a big difference in the long run, that they would have to ascertain if, you know, whatever they were being instructed to do, there was actually a permit. So yeah, the way that this was done, I absolutely feel that they should be named. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Joe?
I did a minor rewrite of the announcement and I did not include the contractor's name.
Thank you, Joe. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Ian. I think the contractor's name should absolutely be included. We don't need a regulatory update because we already can hold contractors accountable. But I do think that we haven't submitted a lot of press reports before. This could be an educational opportunity. So I'm wondering if we can add a line, you know, that's just specifically says like, to all contractors who are potentially reading this, please check any work you're doing to ensure the proper permits are in place, or some better way to say that. But, you know, if this gets into the paper and the current and whatever else, a lot of people are going to read it. So whether they care about Gully Road or not, that's a great educational opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Mike?
Thank you, Ashley. I don't think it's mysterious who the contractor was for anybody who's been following it. And I think Seth's comment of encouraging other people to be aware of what they're doing is a good way to soft it. It just speaks to the education on the matter. So I think they're both good suggestions.
Thank you, Mike. I have to agree that I think the contractor's name should be in there. Like, I remember the Holly Farm incident, and you know, that contractor who was working for the land bank got dragged through it, you know, so this person should also be named. And I also agree, Seth, it's a great idea to include the educational piece, because that's kind of why the press release is going out. Like, hey, this happened, these are the steps, and then adding the, you know, contractors beware sort of thing. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Mark,
I too would support the name going on. I think that's an important thing to add to the press release. And I like Seth's addition of putting the contractors on notice to just be aware if you're standing in water, you probably need a permit.
Thank you, Mark. So Will, do you feel like we have everything we need to kind of finish those edits and hopefully get the document off?
Yes, and I think what Seth mentioned is probably the most important part of this press release. So I'll add another couple lines in, get that drafted. My big question was answered that I think needed a little bit of discussion, because I just can't decide things myself just with a couple of emails. So I'm happy we talked about it. If everybody's comfortable with that, I will add those few lines in, and then I think that I should be able to email to you all, and if everybody says okay, then we go. I'm pretty confident we can get there.
Okay.
This time.
Michelle Hunton. Oh, you're muted.
I know this isn't a public discussion, but I represent the DiMartinos, and I just wanted to request if you can add that the restoration work has been completed. So we would appreciate if that a simple sentence can be added to that effect.
Thank you. I believe there's pretty robust documentation of, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but like the robust and kind of fabulous restoration that's happening. So I think those successes are absolutely called out here. Will?
And I was just going to say, I mean, I can say in here that the restoration has been completed at some point because this was written before it was done. So it might be in a slightly different tone, you know?
Yeah, I just worry without like like actually going through the monitoring, et cetera.
Right. It's not complete.
Like maybe the initial planting phase is complete, but say the survivability doesn't match. You know, I don't, you know, again, the plants are in the ground, but I worry about that statement maybe being slightly misleading.
Yes. I mean, if I may, Ashley, I mean, first of all, the bottom line is that, you know, now all of a sudden they've got this marvelous water view that they wouldn't have had from their platform. And I feel they're getting off. I guess I'll refrain from saying what I think, except saying that I don't think we should add that at all. So.
Thank you, Ian. Seth?
Yeah, it's certainly not completed. It's ongoing. I think there's a lot of documentation about that being ongoing. I don't mind it being said ongoing or however it's worded in the letter right now, but it's a multi-year process, minimum 3 years, and it might end up taking more. So we really need to wait and see before we say completed here.
Thank you, Seth. Okay, so at this point, I think Will, you'll kind of just tighten up those final edits and hopefully everybody just reply directly to Will if you're okay with everything, and then hopefully we'll get this sent out as soon as possible. All right, so that moves us on to enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions. Give it over to Will.
All right. So Will had a learning experience, so this section is going to be extremely short tonight. I was informed today that any enforcement actions that we've already opened, I need to be specifically listing on the agenda, and we're not okay just under enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions on the agenda. And I learned that this morning, which was too late to add in any of those lines. So we are not going to talk about anything that we expected to talk about tonight, and we will be talking about it in 2 weeks.
Right.
And that was Will's mistake. It was more of an assumption that our blanket of potential enforcement actions and enforcement actions covered us under anything. But once something's been public or publicly opened, it's got to be specifically agended.
Thank you, Will. All right, so that moves us to reports. We have Crack.
So Crack is working on a draft statement to send to the select board regarding the Sconset Bluff. And it's 3 short paragraphs. If you'd like me to read you the draft statement, or I can have Will send it out. So I would say it's about 20 lines.
I'm fine either way. Why don't you just read it, Ian, if it's
Okay.
kind of short.
So the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee encourages the directly involved parties, Baxter Road property owners, the Select Board, the Conservation Commission, and town staff and consultants to continue negotiating the process for managed retreat from the Sconset Bluff and relocation of Baxter Road due to the threat of erosion, cutting off access and destroying infrastructure. The interests of the island community as a whole must be kept in mind so that the efforts in this area do not place either adverse environmental impact or excessive cost burdens on island residents not in the project area. Although geotubes and other erosion control structures are effective at reducing erosion at their specific locations while they are properly maintained with the addition of sacrificial sand, the possible harm to adjacent and downstream properties from deflected wave energy or sand starvation and the high monetary costs, disproportionate allocation of sand, significant management time, and neighborhood disruptions all speak against relying on such structures in highly dynamic and vulnerable environments such as the Sconset Bluff. In addition, erosion of the bluff will continue to occur from other environmental factors such as wind, rain, runoff, and instability, and erosion of unprotected portions of the bluff will eventually affect currently protected portions as well, supporting a sense of urgency for the road relocation and managed retreat, even if portions of the bluff toe remain protected. Thank you. Should I have Will send that out as well?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Ian. All right, so that moves us on to CPC.
We have not met for a while, and we are meeting coming up soon for our annual meeting with our potential clients. So nothing to report.
Thank you, Mark. NP and EDC.
Next meeting is Monday, but I can pinch hit for the harbor plan since Linda's not here.
Perfect.
So we had a very successful public meeting that I think was mentioned, and we just today got a compilation of all sort of like the initial public feedback from that meeting, and the process is continuing with a additional public meeting planned for later in the summer, which is tentatively going to be August, but some people have said maybe there might be July and August. So we're moving forward with robust public comment on the harbor plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And that brings us to the offshore wind work group.
Nothing going on there.
Okay. So on to commissioners' comments. Will, I just had one kind of question for you. I'm just curious, we discussed this last meeting, if we've had any boots on the ground or any response from SBPF regarding getting the front of those geotubes covered.
I have a disappointing but not surprising answer for you, I guess, but there has been nothing on that front. And whatever day I sent an email out, Tuesday, sorry, long, short week, to no response from Meredith. So that's where we are at.
Okay. Maybe we need to send another message to them. Again, just kind of imploring them to keep those tubes covered as per their original permit.
And I think, sorry, just to add to what I just said too, but I think if we have time tomorrow, I'm going to try to go over there with Morgan and get eyes on the front of the geotubes in some way, because I've only seen them from the top in the last 2 weeks or so. So I'd like to just see what the front looks like, but I'm kind of running on an assumption right now.
Thank you, Will. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't speak too much because we're not really in an agenda item, but I have seen them from the front recently within the past 2 weeks now, and the bottom row is definitely uncovered.
Thank you, Seth. Mike?
Thank you, Ashley. Will be able to distribute pictures from that without, I don't see a reason you wouldn't. That would be helpful because I don't make it down there that often.
I'm going to try to fly a drone so I don't have to go down either.
Okay, well, that's even much cooler then.
But pictures, for sure.
Thank you, Will. I think we'd all appreciate just
Cool.
kind of seeing the current status at this point. So thank you. Any other commissioners' comments? All right, looks like no. So we'll move this to administrator staff reports. Will?
This is just a comment on another thing that I didn't put on the agenda, but I don't want this to slide, so I'm going to make it my commissioner's comment. The dates for the reg update, and we don't have Linda here, but just keep an eye on your email because I did write down some potential meeting dates, but I'll email everybody. I was just looking at the Monday site visit dates that we already have posted. So I think the next 3 that would make sense would be the July 31st, the August 14th, and August 28th. And those would be at 4 p.m. But again, I'm going to send this out as an email. I just wanted to make mention of it tonight as well because I had planned on it.
Thank you, Will. All right, so if that's it, we are to the end of this meeting. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Mike. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Okay.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Mizzarelli,
Aye.
Landowski.
Aye.
All right, this meeting is adjourned, and I hope I get to see you guys in 2 weeks, but if not, it's been a great time.
Me too.
We hope we get to see you both as well.
Good luck
Yes.
to both of you.
Good luck and have a good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night,
night,
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Is that ice cream, Mark? I'm hanging up.
Dude,